Fei is the regional English language officer at the U.S. Embassy in Mexico City. He oversees public diplomatic authority through English language teaching for the U.S. Department of State in Belize, Cuba, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Mexico. He has also served in Tashkent, Moscow, Lima, Ankara, and Islamabad. A Fulbright alum, he holds an undergraduate degree in Latin American Studies and Spanish and graduate degrees in English language education, U.S. literature, and resource management. A native Iowan, David Fay became a diplomat in 2003 after nearly 2 decades as a teacher training, and publisher, working in the United States, Costa Rica, Spain, and Turkey. Another round of applause for him, please. Thank you. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Dante. Good afternoon. I want to congratulate the Secretaría de Educación de Jalisco for putting this program together. It's very motivating. If I were a teacher about your age, I'm guessing early 20s, I would be very motivated as a teacher. Today, my talk will be in English. I will use another language, a surprise language later on. I am happy to pepper my talk with some Spanish as well, not a problem, but I was asked to specifically speak in English today. So now that you know a little bit about me, I want to see how much I can learn about you. How many of you right now are English teachers? Okay. How many of you are working on becoming English teachers? Excellent, excellent. How many of you are here to hear a gringo speak in English just so you can pass an hour like that? Very good. So, I've lived in Mexico City for 2 years. I don't know if that makes me a chilango or not. Probably not. But I have been to this beautiful state of Jalisco a couple of times, and I must say I am impressed by all that you have. I want to talk today a little bit about this spiraling idea. And you can see there are 5 S's. And I'm going to talk about those 5 S's. The 5th S, the last S, is spiral. It has to do a little bit with architecture, but it also has to do with the architecture of learning. Because I think all too often we think in a straight line. I don't know if you saw this morning's talks by Gabriel, Dr. Maggioli, or by, I believe it was Mauricio. They talked about a sort of circuitous route to get to a certain level of English. Our curriculums are often very direct. They're very linear. And I'm going to be advocating this idea of being more like a spiral or a snake. The building, one of my favorite museums in the world, does anybody recognize it? It's the Guggenheim. It's in New York City. And you walk in circles as you go up or as you go down. Your choice. Architecture is central to teaching. Right now, as a teacher, I am standing on a stage. You are sitting in chairs, and all of your chairs are facing me, like a cinema. What is the position of power? Right up here on the stage. What is the position that is passive or could be passive? All of those positions down there. It's a major issue, and personally, as an educator, I think this is awkward. And I hope that one of the things we do in our classrooms is erase that vertical difference and that we create opportunities to explore and practice language. I'm going to try a little bit of that with you today. I will try. One other thing to really keep in mind as we move forward with this is the idea of voice. For voice, I'm looking at two things. A figurative meaning for voice. In other words, finding who you are. The presentation just before me was about autism. Some of you saw that. It was a fantastic presentation, and I am so happy to see the education system addressing special needs. It is critical that we look at special needs. One of the things that jumped out at me was how important it was for somebody who is autistic to be able to express themselves, to find their voice. This is true for every student. Finding your voice, finding confidence, finding your ability to speak your mind and give your opinion is what modern education should be about. That's the figurative side. The literal is literally your voice, using your voice. How many times has a classroom gone by that is a language classroom, whether it's Spanish or English or French or a native tongue, where the students are not actually using their voice? So let's try something. Joël, thank you. So I want you to pick one of these four faces. Just pick one of them. Think about being that person. You are that person. You are not a native English speaker, and you are not a native Spanish teacher. Excuse me, Spanish speaker. So neither English nor Spanish is your mother tongue. However, your English is good, at least in intermediate level. You can speak in English. You are sitting next to somebody who is another one of those faces, hopefully, unless you all pick the same face. I'll let you figure that out. But I want you to right now turn to that person next to you, and if you are alone, find somebody nearby. For example, the two of you are close to each other. You can work together. And remember, you're role-playing. You are one of these people. Tell them your name, your role name, where you are from, and then I want you to talk about why you want to improve your English. Come up with one or two reasons about why you want to improve your English. Please, take 1 or 2 minutes to do that right now. And if you're alone, find someone. Okay. Let me get your attention. In a classroom, hopefully you're doing activities like this. And when you're done with a good activity, and you know it's good because when you begin speaking as a teacher, everybody continues doing the activity. It's a good activity. How do you get the attention of the students when they are so involved in their group work and pair work? What do you do? Do you yell, "Stop! Look at me"? I hope not. You hit them? No. Raise your hand. I love it. That is a great one. Putting up your hand, covering your mouth, and tell the other students to do the same thing. So you're done with your activity, you raise the hand, you cover the mouth. Brilliant. Turning on and off the lights, I've heard. The only issue is if you have a lot of sun coming into your classroom, that will not work. But I think that is a smart way to go. I heard a couple of the pairs, the conversations, why you are trying to improve English. And I think some of the reasons that came out were academic mobility, maybe going to a graduate program that is English medium, some for work. Of course, if you chose being an English teacher, you hopefully will always want to improve your English. That's critical. Maybe some of you talked a little bit about culture. Maybe you like a certain writer or music. I know many people who have been motivated that way. Many young people are motivated by gaming, video games. They want to improve their English for that reason. The reason I'm talking about this has to do with my first S. Are your students swayed? Are they convinced? Do they feel that they know why they are learning English? This morning, Dr. Maggioli talked about motivation and creating an environment where students feel motivated. I do believe we can motivate students. I do believe we can. And one of the things we need to do is to be able to remind them why they are learning English. If we cannot do that on a daily basis, give them one reason. If we cannot do that on a daily basis, then we're going to have trouble bringing those students along. So keep that in mind, that motivation, I think, is at the heart of any lesson that we walk into. Are we able to sway, to convince, to move our students? That's my first S. Let's go to the next one. So, years ago, I was in a touristy place, let's call it Cancun, and a group of students came up to me, 10 years old, 11 years old, and they were excited. They were running, and they found a foreigner. They look at this guy, the pinta de gringo, and they want to talk. And one of the boys, who is brave enough, comes up to me and he says, "This is a pencil." I looked around. There was no pencil. He was not framing it as a question either. He simply said, "This is a pencil." Why? Because that's what he was taught in class. And it was repeated over and over and over again. And again this morning, the great sessions that they had about English teaching was to make it relevant, to make it significant, to make it substantial. That's my second S. If our classes are not meaningful, then what good are they? They need to be relevant to the students. A couple of stories. The story on the right, it's about environmental awareness. Through our office, at the US Embassy in Mexico City, we do environmental awareness camps with university students in English. They come together, they're together for 1 week, but before that, online we do a course, and after we do a course. And the goal is, at the end of the training, they have to implement a project on their campuses, on their university campuses. Or they have to integrate environmental awareness into one of their classes with the support of a professor. Many of those who came to this camp are from UDG. I think 3 or 4 of them. One is medical, one is psychology, and I think 2 are engineers, studying to become engineers. This particular project was by a young lady who's up in Monterrey, secondhand clothing. How do you collect secondhand clothing and repurpose it for people who need it, and at the same time earn a little bit of money for other projects? She devised this project, we give them a little bit of support, and then the project runs by itself. In theory, not always, but hopefully. The one on the left, this is a BIS, Bilingüe Internacional Sostenible Tecnológico. There are 46 of them in Mexico, all underneath the Secretaría de Educación. They are wonderful institutions because of their approach to English or French or both. They teach both of those languages at many of these institutions. As you can see, the students there have the bodies of cars. It's the Automotriz major, and it's in Querétaro. The project we did was to develop a course that pulled together English, ethics, and environmental awareness specific to the automotive industry. There was a session right behind here that talked about experiential learning, project-based learning. We put the students in groups. They have to solve real-world problems. Does anybody remember the scandal with Volkswagen a few years ago? The diesel motors, that they were not monitoring the exhaust? A major scandal, global scandal. It forced Volkswagen to completely change the structure of its company. We give these problems to these students to solve. They are doing it in English. They are using real skills, real knowledge from their field. When these kids graduate, they are gobbled up by Ford, by Toyota, Mazda, all of the companies that you see in that Central Valley. They are gobbled up. Why? Because they have technical knowledge and they have English. Right now in Jalisco, in Guadalajara, there are millions of dollars that are being invested in something called the microchip industry to try to reform the industry here in the state of Jalisco. Are we preparing our students to think critically, to solve problems related directly to the microchip industry? If you're teaching primaria, I understand. Maybe you're not quite going in that direction yet, but critical thinking should begin then. And if you're teaching secundaria or higher, I hope you're relating your content to something relevant to the students. Let's go to the next one. One of those that I think is important is critical media literacy. Many of our students are using the internet for everything. They're spending more time with the internet than speaking with their friends or with their parents. It's integrated into their life. But are we teaching them about fake news? Are we teaching them about artificial intelligence? The session before the last one, before autism. Are we teaching them to navigate? Because English is central to this critical media literacy. This is from Voice of America, Learning English. It's got some great material on critical media literacy. Joelle, the next one, please. We have a free course online. It's a massive open online course, English for Media Literacy. If you'd like to take a photo of it, it is currently being offered. As you can see, possibly, that it will go until December of this year. These are free classes. If you're a teacher, I recommend taking this. You will get some ideas about what to use in the classroom. So English for Media Literacy. So substantial, significant. Let's go to the third S. Next one, Joelle. So my third S is about structuring and scaffolding, that andamiaje that we need to be able to teach. If we were going to teach something about gifting, about giving gifts, we might want to begin the lesson by going through, when does it happen? When does one give gifts? Who is involved in that process? What could the gifts be, depending on the occasion? What are the feelings that are involved? This would be the way to begin getting the students moving towards an understanding. We also may want to give them some patterns that they can use with the words and the phrases that are generated here. So, some basic patterns that we would want to give the students. You don't necessarily need a course book for this. You don't need handouts for this. This could be an impromptu lesson that builds on the students' prior knowledge. We want to start with something familiar and then get them to use that language in a certain way. We need to do these things, the structuring and the scaffolding. However, there's a caveat. The question is, do we act too much like an Italian grandmother? Mangiare, mangiare, eat more, eat more. Are we trying to give them too much? Do we worry that if they don't know a word, they cannot advance? So it's a balancing act. Structure, scaffolding with creativity. So I'm going to try an activity with you. Joelle, next one. Let's imagine that the Minister of Education of Jalisco has been invited to, do you recognize the city? Has been invited to Istanbul. The Secretary of Education of Jalisco has been invited to Istanbul and needs an interpreter. And you love Turkish soap operas. You love Turkish TV. So you really want to go to Istanbul. And so you submit your CV and you put on there that you are a quick learner and that you understand some Turkish. And the Secretary of Education says, you have the job. So you are excited. You know English, requirement. You know Spanish, requirement. And you think you know Turkish, and you're going to have to wing it. You arrive in Istanbul. You go out to lunch. Secretary of Education of Jalisco with his counterpart, her counterpart, in Istanbul. And the Secretary of Education in Istanbul tells a story. And the secretaria de Educación de Jalisco says, cuéntame qué dice cuando termina el cuento. Me tienes que contar todo lo que ha dicho. And you say, okay, are you ready? You need to listen carefully. I am the counterpart in Turkey. Ben Türkiye'deki sekreter olarak çalışıyorum. Benim arkadaşlarım var. Arkadaşlarımın yıl dönümü kutlanıyor. 20. yıl. 20. yıl evliler. Çok mutlular. Birbirine hediye etmek istiyorlar. Çünkü yıl dönümü. 20. yıl. Birbirine hediye etmek istiyorlar. Fakat maalesef para yok. İş yok. Çok fakirler. Bir hediye almak için hiç para yok. Arkadaşım Ali cep telefonu var. Çok güzel bir telefon. Telefon satıyor. Parayla eşine tarak alıyor. Çok güzel bir tarak alıyor. Hediye olarak. Ozay eşi çok güzel uzun saçları vardı. Fakat gitmiş, kesmiş saçları. Saçları sattı. Satınca eşinin Ali için telefonun kılıfı aldı. Hediyeler birbirine veriyorlar. Açıyorlar Ozay. Taraklar, saç yok. Ağlamaya başlıyor. Ali hediye açıyor. Cep telefonunun kılıfı görüyor. Fakat cep telefonu yok. Ağlıyorlar. End of story. So, now, el secretario de Educación de Jalisco te dice, cuéntame, ¿qué dijo? Cuéntame. What do you say? Anybody want to try? Is there an extra microphone? First, to be
No, the guy sold his telephone in order to buy a gift for her wife, his wife, I'm sorry. Yes? And she did the same, no? In order to buy extension for her husband. Yes? More or less. Okay.
And to confirm, sir, do you know any Turkish?
No.
Okay. Anybody want to add to what this gentleman said?
En español, bien. Había una vez un matrimonio que iba a ser su aniversario de bodas y él se puso muy triste porque no tenía dinero para regalarle nada a su esposa. Entonces decidió vender su celular y lo vende para comprarle un hermoso regalo. Ella, por su parte, estaba también preocupada porque no tenía dinero y decide cortarse el cabello y venderlo para comprar un hermoso regalo. Ella le compra una funda para su celular y él le compra una hermosa peineta. Y cuando se dan los regalos, se dan cuenta de que él ya no tiene celular y ella se cortó el cabello.
And to confirm, how is your Turkish language ability?
Mi lengua es...
¿Sabes hablar en turco?
Sé hablar en turco. No, no sé nada de turco.
Nada de turco.
No. Pero lo entendí.
Lo entendiste,
Es muy
gracias.
bueno.
Gracias. So, this, I hope, was an example. Again, standing up on the stage, as I'm telling the story, I see your eyes light up. That's the magic of being in front of a group of students, is you can tell when they're beginning to understand something. I just told a story that lasted about 6 minutes in Turkish, in a language that I believe none of you know, and yet you were following it. Granted, the pictures help. Granted, my gestures helped. My facial expression helped. Were there any cognates that you heard? I think there was one. Telephone. There was one, telephone. What impressed me was the telefonin kılıfı, which was the funda, which you had to work through in your own mind, right? I also think many of you know the story. What's the story, Joel? The next slide, please. The gift, O. Henry. In fact, I believe it was made into a famous Mexican movie in the 1960s. The woman cuts her hair, sells her hair, buys what for her husband? There were no cep telefonları, there were no telephones in the 1960s like that. What did she buy for her husband? Watch. A watch chain. Very good. This is a story from the 1920s. A story from the 1920s. And maybe that pattern, that story, is deep down inside of you. Maybe you saw it. It exists in many versions. It exists as a cartoon. It exists as a story in Hollywood. It exists as a story in Mexican cinema. So maybe you know it from having read it or seen it before. That's what we call schema theory, what you bring to the experience. But I want you to think about what you just did. You took a language you did not know and you turned it into something recognizable. That is the power of the human mind. It's the power of communication, and never underestimate that. Let's go to the next one. We'll finish up very quickly. Storytelling, the fourth S. Never stop telling stories. Your stories are meaningful to your students. You tell stories, let students tell stories. Make sure they get a lot of good input from stories. Next one. What's our curriculum? What's this something mágica? La cajita mágica, I think is what it's called. Maybe? It turns around. It's a toy I've seen here in Mexico and many places. The idea being that language is not linear. I talked about a spiral before. Now I'm going to talk about this cajita mágica. It folds in on itself. It turns around. It spins on itself. Our curriculums should be put together in a way that allows students to revisit and reuse over and over and over again. The last slide. This is my information. If you are interested in a copy of this PowerPoint, feel free to write to me. I'm happy to share this PowerPoint with you. If there's anything else we can help you with, we're ready to help you. We have a booth over here. The U.S. consulate here in Guadalajara is helping. I know it's the end of the conference today. Any of you coming to Mextisol that begins Thursday? If you are, we will also be at Mextisol. Please come up and visit us. Thank you so much.
Mr. David, please, can you come with us? Mr. David, en el nombre de la Dirección de Lenguas Extranjeras y de la Secretaría de Educación del Estado de Jalisco, le agradecemos por su excelente ponencia, por su destacado apoyo y participación como ponente durante esta tercera feria. Les agradecemos por estar aquí y les pido un gran aplauso para él, por favor.
Muchas gracias. Muy amable. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias. Muy amable. Muy amable.